All right, everybody, we're going to go through Dan, his case study. He did an 8-week program, men's program, and yeah, it's really quite a transformation. So when he arrived with us, he was feeling uncomfortable in his own skin. That's his own words, as well as impotent as a man, which is pretty much saying he had no control and felt useless. Yeah, really quite sad to be able to say that about yourself. He was feeling unseen, unheard, not respected, and a real lack of confidence. A lot of nice guy stuff was going on with Dan. He was unable to make decisions. He didn't know what he really wanted and needed, and very poor at communication. But he completely turned his life around. They're his words as well. Turned his life around, and he feels absolutely amazing now. He's excited for his future. Such positive outlook that Dan's got, he's going ahead with now. He knows how to get his needs met, learn healthy communication, and smashing record commissions at work, which he's absolutely buzzing about. So yeah, as I said, his words were, felt impotent as a man. What's this look like? Unable to get his needs met and unable to communicate effectively. They go hand in hand. And when there was any need for communication, he would only fawn in that confrontation rather than speaking his truth, what he believed or what he needed. So yeah, complete people pleaser, only compliant, wanted to be liked by everyone and feared rejection. Hence, he would scarper away when confrontation would come close. And because of this, it lent to becoming resentful to those around him, which is basically what happens with nice guys. Eventually you get to this stage. He knew inside something was wrong, and he didn't know what. So it was time to go on the journey. So he knew something had to change. He was feeling dissatisfied as a man, and he was crying out for the change. His feelings inside were dejected and frustrated, very much so. He needed to reflect inwards, okay? He had to go on this journey to understand what was going on and to make the progress. But feeling impotent, useless, he didn't want to settle for dissatisfaction. So while feeling useless without not having an impotent, he knew he didn't want to settle for it. He knew he wanted more. So he'd already done a couple of years of work, counselling, and a lot of reading. He would talk about all this stuff quite a lot, but he didn't have an action plan how to progress on to the next stage, which is why coaching works really well for guys, because it's really forward focused, and this is what Dan needed after doing so much reflection in the past. So he was accepting and embracing growth. He resisted it. His words were, he threw all the toys out the pram before going on this journey. He put the breakdown of communication and with his ex-partner and the feeling of being unheard at work. These were the tipping points for Dan, where it just got really too low for him, and he's ready to go on his journey. He had no control over really much what was going on, and was really at a real low point, and to the point he was uncomfortable in his own skin. He didn't really know what his wants and needs were, so how much did he actually know himself, or who that guy was inside his skin? So it was time to find support. Identifying patterns, okay, and where they came from. He had no roadmap. He didn't know where he's going, okay? He didn't have his values or priorities written down. He'd never asked himself what they were. So he was like a ship with no direction. Communication, had never set a boundary in his life, didn't know how to set them. Okay, so in relationships, you're always going to be on the back foot if you're going to always let everyone walk all over you. And that was definitely Dan, whether it's professional or romantically. So as I said, it started to lead to resentment, and with his colleagues, he was really always on the back foot because he would fawn and walk away from when there was time to make progress or to assert himself. And this is really what he flipped on the head, why he made absolute amazing progress once he started doing the work. His self-worth, his intrinsic value was a real low point because of his negative self-talk. Couldn't big himself up in the slightest. He had no self-respect or appreciation for who he was as a guy. So that's exactly it. So it's time for a new truth he had to tell himself, rewrite his own story. He opened up amazingly well. That was really why Dan was able to progress so quick, as most guys do. He opened up straight away and shared lots. He was very comfortable with it, in fact, because he was so wanting to make progress and had hit such a low point for himself. We identified root patterns of limiting beliefs, really were ingrained in his way of thinking. So we changed the story completely, what he was telling himself, rewrote those fears and worked out what was holding him back. And through this healthy self-talk, his confidence started to boom and he became the stronger guy in all the relationships in his life. So he understood the need to be balanced between the direction he was going in and his mindset. He'd hit like the real low point and felt really lost because he didn't really know what his wants and needs were. So with getting this action plan together, goals and his purpose, as well as cracking the mindset, getting new healthy habits in place, practicing mindfulness, he appreciated that both were needed to be going in this new direction and to the importance of keeping a clear head. So we explored how Dan became a nice guy, okay? From a young age, his needs were not being met. And through this, he understood the difference between someone who didn't know what his needs were and they weren't getting met, in comparison to once he knew what his needs were and he could look after himself, reparent himself and prioritise himself, okay? And then he started to fill his own bucket by prioritising himself, putting himself first and looking after himself, his own needs. The people around him who were supporting him obviously kept on board, but there's some people he had to like get out of his life and there's other people he wanted to get into his life as well. This is all part of the process by working out which relationships are cooperative, reciprocal, and others which are just take, okay? It's got to be give and take. Win-win relationships is something that we evaluate. So on top of all this, Dan embodied the king energy that was required to move on. So he was brutally honest, Dan was, with what habits were holding him back, so then he could move on to build new healthy habits across all aspects of his life. And with those goals, he would put the habits in place to work towards those big, like ambitious goals towards the end, and started to build them in as a routine. He was hitting them all consistently, and he was being accountable for himself. With this, then his self-worth and his self-respect started growing because he was putting that time into himself. And yeah, like I say, these small wins, that is what increased his motivation, his drive and his focus to a super high level. He even talked about working at Christmas Day. So yeah, he was motivated to another level he hadn't been before. Right, so just like to recap, when Dan arrived, he was feeling lost and impotent, okay, uncomfortable in his own skin. He really was a shell of the person that he wanted to move on to be him. And with this, he had become resentful in all relationships. He was coming off second best every confrontation, in communication, because these are skills he did not have. Forward 8 weeks later, okay, he clearly knew what he wanted. He had gained clarity on where he was going in his life. And then because of this confidence he had in where he was going, he could communicate in relationships. And with that, he was setting all-time highs with work and his health had increased tenfold. He was feeling fitter than ever. His new all this added to his improved self-worth and respect. And he was, you could say, as you can see, embodying a very healthy, masculine, modern man. The three things that are holding Dan back when he arrived, okay, these are pretty common. So that he had lack of confidence and self-respect for himself, which was leading him to be uncomfortable in his own skin. Nice guy behaviour. In Dan's words, like boundaries, and he just couldn't communicate effectively, so he felt like he was coming off best and resenting people. He was uncertain of what he wanted in his life, so he felt impotent. He had no clarity on where he was going, okay? So he had no control of where he was going, and because he didn't know where he was going. So these were the big things, the hurdles that Dan arrived to us with.